Hi, Mitchell Levy here, global credibility expert. I have to tell you, this is one of the most funnest times of my day. And that is talking to somebody who is just super cool. I'd be happy to talk to her anytime, but talking to her about her values and doing it live. Oh, I'm so excited for Casey Hasten. Casey, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mitchell. Like I said, I always love having conversations with you.
Oh, I do as well. And so I'm happy you're here. I'm excited. I'd love the audience to get to know you. So, who are you?
I think the best way to describe me is at the core, I am a relationship building magnet. That is every piece of my life that I touch is based on building those solid, extraordinary relationships. And so I do that. I never refuse a phone call because you never know where that phone call is going to go or, the next person that they might introduce you to. And I tell people all the time, I love making new friends. And because I love making new friends, it feeds into all the other areas of my life where I play, which is in recruiting, which is in running a relationship building organization, which is helping our young executives, just to name a few things that I do.
I kind of like, okay, self described as a relationship building magnet. What does that mean?
What that means to me is that I am constantly looking for those new opportunities to meet new people. And because I am so open, those relationships come to me. I'm constantly getting referred and introduced to new people for one reason or another. So that's why I describe it as a magnet.
Nice. All right. So, what makes a good relationship then?
Um, well, it's also my number one internal rule because I do have a set of internal rules that I make decisions by. And I think a good relationship is where you give value first. What can I do for you? Not what can you do for me?
Okay. By the way, I love that. Being a servant leader is always, it's one of the values of being credible. I got that. And yes. And how do you know? I guess the interesting, by the way, I'm going to say I would like to fall in that camp too, or I fall in that camp too as a relationship building magnet. I'm sure I could always use help and tips. What happens when it doesn't come back? Like, how do you know?
If it doesn't come back, let me add a little bit more to that rule. Give value first without expectation. So if you don't have an expectation of receiving something back, you're never disappointed. I do not
Mm,
go into any conversation expecting to receive something back from that person. If I do, bonus, and I usually do, but I'm a firm believer. Have you read the book The Go Giver?
yeah, yeah.
I love that philosophy. I absolutely love that philosophy. And I think that kind of wraps it up and puts a nice little bow on it. Whenever I'm dealing with young executives, specifically those who have just graduated from college, there's two books that I give them that I think are so impactful. The first one is The Go Giver, because I feel like if they can develop that mentality of giving value first, one of the laws is you have to be open to receive, and that's hard for me because I want to do all the giving, you know, and
Ah,
yeah, that's a whole
I'm a big
other
Bob
subject.
Burr fan, so I've known him for decades. So
Uh,
yeah, gotcha.
I love Bob Berg. We should do like a hashtag or an at Bob Berg. He would jump on in a second. I know he would. Um, but the second book that I give them is The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And I love
Ooh.
that book because as much as we say, oh, I'm too busy to do that in the morning, by doing a miracle morning, by having that process that prepares you for your day, you get more time back.
Hmm. Tell me a little bit more.
About the miracle morning.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've been doing the miracle morning for probably about 5 or 6 years. And it is a time commitment. My miracle morning is about an hour in the morning. And there are 6 steps. And what Hal Elrod did was he went and he looked at all the successful people in the world. Why are they so successful? What do they do different from other people? Right. And he combined those into a miracle morning methodology that he calls the savers. Don't ask me to quote all of them, but most of it begins with, the first thing you need to do is you need to have some time for yourself, right? Call it quiet, call it meditation, call it prayer. That time to calm your mind and calm that inner chaos, right? Tell that inner critic to go away. Really get in tune with your inner landscape. The second thing that he talks about is to write. Journaling is a huge part, and for 2 reasons. And I'm not talking about journaling on your phone or on your iPad. Write, because there's magic that happens when you write stuff down. It's actually called double encoding. And what that does is when you write it down, you store it in one part of your brain. When you look at it, you store it in a different part of your brain. And so your subconscious can't help but focus on whatever it is you're writing down. It's like having a subconscious engine working on your behalf all day long. Another thing that I do each morning is I set my intention for the day. What do I want to accomplish today? Because if you don't have a target, and again, the mind is such a beautiful thing, right? Because you tell it what you want to focus on. And so if you tell it that you want to be unhappy today, or I write down how I feel every single morning. And if you tell yourself, I'm sad, you just told your mind, I'm sad. Go show me all the different ways I'm sad. And that's what it's going to do. But if you tell it I'm happy, it wants to confirm that. It doesn't know any better but to do what you tell it to do. It's called the reticular activation system. So are you familiar with that?
That's nice. But
yeah.
But say more, please.
So the other things that he talks about are movement. So getting some kind of exercise, visualizing. And that goes back to that intention piece. Visualize what you want your day to look like. Okay. Exercise, reading. Reading's a big part of it. Leaders are readers. I can't remember who said that, but I know it gets bandied around all the time. And then, of course, just the journaling again, going back to that journaling piece. I know I haven't covered all of them, but those are the ones that I do. I try to read every morning. And I usually read like 2 different books in the morning. I like to read one that's like a quick little lesson for the day. So right now I'm reading the Tao of Leadership, which is incredible. Nice. And then I'll read another book that's more professionally driven. So for example, right now I'm reading Who Not How. Fantastic book.
Oh, I love that book.
It's such a good book, isn't it?
Yeah. I so enjoyed 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel that I'm actually, as soon as I got to the end, I just said, I want to listen to it again. So I'm doubling down. So Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 is really, particularly with your Success North Dallas hat on. That's a book worth taking a look at.
Oh, I will definitely pick that up.
So servant leadership, got that, check. Focusing on one of the things that's important that people don't always realize who are servant leaders, that you have to serve you first before you could serve others. If you're not ready.
Yes.
So clearly you're doing that, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more.
I had a gentleman on my podcast a few weeks ago. Time just flies. And he gave me a new verbiage for self-care. And I love it because he says self-care sounds kind of self-serving. And you're taking care of yourself. But if you just change the words, because words matter, right? To self-optimization. It takes on a whole new light. So now we're looking at, I'm sleeping so I can help you. I'm getting my 8 hours of sleep. I'm drinking my water so I can show up better for you, a healthier me. So those are things, and you have to know I'm a little nutty. And so I'm also a journal junkie, and I track every area of my life because that's what keeps me focused. And I'm not a focused person by nature, right? I have to have these systems in place. And so one of the things that I track is my self-care each day. How many steps did I take? How much water did I drink? How did I sleep last night? How long did I sleep last night? And yes, how much do I weigh this morning?
Yeah, I know. It's that's a habit my wife and I are into too. And like, this is not a good one, but we do it. And we talk about it.
It is I think it is a good one. It's part of being self-aware of where you're at.
Mm. So, so I'm going to jump back to the question that I asked earlier. And it was, so I agree with you. I give without an expectation of getting back. And on that first meeting, you never expect to get back. But let's say you've now had 3 or 4 or 5 meetings and they're always taking and you're always giving.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that?
So I have a term for that. It's called a time suck. And
That's a great term.
you know
Okay.
who I'm talking about.
I do.
um, and those people that are constantly wanting to just draw your time without, and I'm not saying that they have to give back, but if I'm constantly giving to them, and for example, like if I'm giving to them, but they're not taking any of the advice that I've given them, that's not a good use of my time, you know? And so I will gently not be as available, which is, as you know, I mean, I'm sure you have a very full schedule too. That's not hard to explain away, you know? I could just say, look, I'm sorry, my calendar is completely full for the next 2 weeks. Let's circle back later. And a lot of times, if they don't get that instant gratification, they don't circle back. They don't have that follow through because they weren't there to truly build a relationship.
Hmm.
I love it when you're thinking.
So I'm hearing you. I'm trying to come up with that really strange. So let's say so for me, for instance, they have access to my calendar. And so they
Mhm.
can continue to book time on my calendar. Actually, I'll let me give a generic one. What often happens to me is that CMO wants to talk with me, but they want to talk with me every 2 to 4 years when they change their jobs, right?
Mhm.
So they're changing their
Yep.
job and they quit their job and now they're looking for the next one. And they're like, Mitchell, we got to brainstorm. I need help. Who can you introduce me to? And then they get into their company and inevitably they're not around to take any of my calls during those 2 to 3 years or 2 to 4 years when they're in the company. But then they want me again when they quit. And so I typically somewhere around the second or third time, or typically it's more like 3 or 4, I actually will say, and then I actually say, listen, you realize that you're a taker, and
Mhm.
and let me tell you what's going on, and so how do we fix that? And then they make all these platitudes and promises, and then I don't hear from them again for the rest of my life. That's kind of what I do. I don't know if it's a good thing to do, but that's what ends up happening.
Well, here's one thing that I will tell you that I do when I meet people for the first time. I have the option to send a one-time link to my calendar. So I don't give them carte blanche to my calendar. They have to ask permission for that link. So that's one way that I control my time and control the people that I invest into. The other thing that I would say, and I've had people like that too. I'm a recruiter. I deal with people when they're looking for a job. But I think what you just said, by educating them that they are a taker, I think that honesty is, that's one of my core values, is honesty is the best policy. And if you educate them, then what they do with that education piece that you've shared with them, that's up to them. You have no control over that. But you have at least set the stage for not taking their call in 2 to 4 years.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go back to the self education, and it's so funny. One of my clients actually says that if 17% of his time is not spent on learning new things. He's not as productive during the month. Do you get that level of granularity?
No.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember this or not, but my first career was as an accountant where I sure could have used some of that being that granular, which is why I don't do that anymore because I'm not a detail person. I need people around me. I need the who's around me that are details so that they can implement whatever crazy idea that I come up with. Right. But I don't get that granular for sure not. I don't disagree with him. I do think a certain amount of time needs to be spent on, learning and professional development. And that's part of what I consider self-optimization. And I take that very seriously. But I couldn't tell you how much percentage of my time I spend on it. Some.
just double checking, you never know where people come from sometimes. So I was curious, you and I met through Success North Dallas.
Mhm.
I spoke there a couple of times. I always remember great interactions with you in our conversations. And now you are leading
Yeah.
it because unfortunately, life moves on and Bill Wallace has retired. And how does running an organization like that? Because you've got your main job, you just
Mhm.
released a new book, and you're running that. How does running an organization like that fit into your values?
I think it fits into my values because, my number one value is authenticity. Um, and following that would be integrity, honesty, all those things and growth. That's one of my top five, always looking for growth. And because Success North Dallas, and I just want to throw this out there, Bill deserved to retire. He's been running Success North Dallas for 34 years. And I'm was honored that I was tapped on the shoulder to take over such a legacy after 34 years. And really, if anybody knows Bill, one of his tenets was that when he founded this in 1988, he founded it with the intention that women would be allowed to network because they weren't back then. They weren't they
Mm.
could, but they weren't welcomed, right? And so for him to turn over the organization to a woman just speaks so highly of his values. But I use my values because Success North Dallas is such a different, I don't call it a networking organization. I call it a relationship building organization. We are truly there to sharpen one another and to learn from our speakers, some of our best of the best speakers. We had Sent Marshall last month, the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. Amazing. If you ever get a chance to hear her, you must listen to Sent Marshall. She's absolutely amazing. And
Mm.
and so when I engage with people in Success North Dallas, I get the opportunity to live out my values and my internal rules by giving value to all, especially like our young executives program that we've started. I sit on the advisory board. I run the mentorship program for them. I pair the mentees and the mentors after very intensive interviews with both. And so this is how I feel like all of this fits into my core values in that I'm serving and I'm helping people to become better versions of themselves if they choose to.
Mm. That's an interesting thing. I like how you said if they choose to. So
Mhm.
how does that's a very interesting question because you're somebody, you see people, right?
Mhm.
You and I both share that where we could see people, we could see where they're going.
Yes.
And I wanted just to point out to those that are listening and watching that sometimes somebody can be so much different than they are today, but then they don't choose to become that person. They choose to either stay where they are or go in another
Mhm.
direction. How do you address that?
I cry.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. It really does when I meet someone with so much potential. And I know as a coach, and you know this too, I can help you unlock that. I can help you overcome those limiting beliefs, those assumptions that you've grown up with, those interpretations that you have in your head, and how you're filling in those gaps of information with information that's not true, right? You're making stuff up to fill in those gaps, and you're causing yourself a lot of pain. And so when I meet someone and I see that potential and, and I pour into a lot of people for this very reason, but if I don't see you participating in that growth, then I'm probably going to have to step back, because that's, again, not a good use of my time if you don't want to change.
So that's where that time suck thing comes back in.
Yeah. Yes.
And I wanted to point out to the audience that you do what I do as well. You showed up early so we could have green room conversation. That's showing respect. So you prepared, you showed respect for this call. I don't have any canned questions, so you can't prepare there. You just can come as you, right? Which of course you are. That's really interesting. How do you see? I am kind of curious. So let's assume we're going to do one question, then we'll do the wrap up. But I want to share for the audience that Success North Dallas was a under Bill Wallace's running, a place where a couple hundred people would physically get together prior to COVID, and then now back again to I'm going to use the word network, but really is about meeting, and the relationships I saw between the members there was much more than just simply that they've networked, right? And support of youth and support of people looking for jobs. It was always very powerful. So you take over somebody as powerful as yourself to do that. What is it tomorrow? Like where do you want to bring it?
I have lots of ideas. Some I can share, some I can't. But we're really putting an emphasis on the young executives because they are our future. And we just recently had our youngest young executive join because she saw what was going on in the room and heard about it. And so now we have I'm about to launch our junior young executives, and I'm going to work with the local schools on that so that we can get kids credit, high school kids credit for attending leadership and entrepreneurial classes at Success North Dallas. Our youngest young executive is 15 years old.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. And she's incredible. And she is, I love what she does because this young lady has muscular dystrophy. Okay. And she does not wear it as a badge. She does not let it limit her or label her whatsoever. And that's why when she stepped up and said, "Hey, I want to be a part of all that," I was just like, of course you do, because she participates in Miss America pageants. She is an ambassador for muscular dystrophy. She's a high school cheerleader. She sees the value at 15. I would be running the world if I saw this at 15.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
For those people who found this really fascinating and they want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to go about doing that?
So there's a couple of ways you can reach out to me. The best way is to catch me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn as far as responding, just because that's the nature of my business and recruiting. But also you can go to my website, CaseyHaston.com, and you can find out more about me, what I'm doing, where I'm showing up. And also you can contact me through that website.
Perfect. By the way, perfectly done. Thank you. So, Casey, given the conversation and what we've covered so far, is there a particular question that we should have covered that we didn't?
And you kind of asked this, but you asked it specifically in regards to Success North Dallas. What's next?
Cool. All right. So I love that. Thank you. Bigger picture.
Yeah.
Casey, what's next for you?
What is next? Well, I published my journal, which is based off me reading The Miracle Morning. It's all my systems and processes that I've been put into place to let me be 5 different places at once. Because you didn't mention I also have a podcast, right? We Are VIP. So I do that too, as well as being the face of the company in all media outreaches. So what's next, based on my journal, the name of the journal is Awaken Your Potential. And there's a colon there for a purpose, because this is the first tool, Awaken, in the Awaken series, for me to help people find out who they really are at the core and get control of that inner world. So next, I am engaging in keynote speaking. as well as working on a course to go along with the journal.
Why is it important that people awaken their potential?
Because I feel like they're just stumbling through life. They're just taking it as it comes and they're not in control. When I awakened, for lack of a better word, because that's my series, my whole world changed. I now control my reality around me, my perception of reality. You know, people watching this conversation right now are not going to see it the same way. Their reality is all going to be different, and it's because of perception. And so I want people to learn that you have a choice. You get to choose what your reality looks like by training your monkey brain, you know, and teaching it what to look for. That's my goal. I want everybody to be as happy as me.
And when did you awaken?
Probably about very later in life, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. But truly, when I went through coaching school, that's when the real work, because, you know, I went to coaching school for a year, and when you go to coaching school, you get coached, you know, and you coach others. And it was such a life-changing transformation. It was like that one little piece that I was missing, that puzzle piece. And when I got that, I was like, whoa, this is a beautiful world.
Can you remember a particular session or a particular time where it switched?
Yeah, I can. There was a very pivotal moment. So you're familiar with gremlins, right? That gremlin that sits on your shoulder and says, you can't do that. You're not good enough, right? And so we
Yeah.
had to do, one of our exercises was we had to do a visual representation of our gremlin. And long story short, I was a redheaded, freckle-faced, ugly duckling growing up. So you can imagine I was the source of much bullying, which is where a lot of my limiting beliefs came in. That gremlin would just say, don't do that. Somebody's going to hurt you, you know? So my gremlin was a Raggedy Ann doll, and they don't come with freckles. So I took a red marker and I drew freckles all over her face. She looks like she has the measles now. And every time a limiting belief would come up, I would make a button with that belief and I would pin it to her dress. That was my visual representation. Once we got back together for, I believe it was Mod 2 of our school, we went through this exercise where we thanked our gremlin and we said, I understand you're just trying to protect me, but I don't need you to do that anymore. I am good enough. My gremlin's name is Telly, which is short for atelophobia, which is the fear of not being good enough.
Ooh.
And once we had told our gremlins that we no longer needed them, we had to hug them. And when I hugged my gremlin, she said, I love you. She had a little thing inside her. I didn't know it. She literally said, I love you. And I really think that was the moment where I went, this is going to be okay.
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad I asked, and I'm so glad you shared. I'm feeling very warm all over. And I
that gave me goosebumps telling that story.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think for those who are listening, that might be the aha moment, because I want to say, Casey, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And for everyone else, thanks for hanging out with us. This is now the right time to spread some cred dust. Click on the like button, share with your friends, write down that aha moment that really resonated with you. And there are many in this conversation, but I love the hug your gremlin, tell the gremlin you love them, and hopefully your gremlin tells you they love you back. Casey Haston, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. See you at the next episode of Leaders Living Their Values. Bye now.